Today, the world's attention is locked onto two cities, far apart in distance, yet deeply connected in consequence. On one side, Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, has quietly become the center of high-stakes diplomacy, where two bitter rivals are maneuvering behind the scenes. On the other, in Washington, a royal visit is unfolding under extraordinary pressure as the British Crown attempts to stabilize a relationship that has defined global power for over a century. This is not just another geopolitical update. This is a story about influence, survival, and the unseen forces shaping the future of international alliances. As we mentioned earlier, Islamabad has transformed into one of the most critical diplomatic hotspots in the world. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, has arrived for urgent consultations following a fragile ceasefire that ended weeks of intense conflict involving Iran and Western-backed forces. But what makes this moment extraordinary is not just his presence, it's the timing. A senior delegation from the United States is also scheduled to arrive in the same city. Two adversaries who refused direct engagement are now operating within the same diplomatic space, relying on Pakistan as the intermediary. This is what analysts often call indirect diplomacy or shadow negotiation, a method historically used during the Cold War, where rivals communicate through third parties to avoid political risk. In this case, Pakistan is playing a role similar to what countries like Switzerland or Oman have done in past global crises. From Iran's perspective, this visit is about survival and leverage. Tehran understands that isolation is its greatest threat. By strengthening ties with Pakistan, it secures a regional partner that can provide both economic opportunities and strategic depth. The proposed gas pipeline, for example, is not just an energy project, it's a geopolitical lifeline. If completed, it could reduce Iran's dependence on unstable trade routes and create long-term interdependence with Pakistan. At the same time, Iran is sending a clear message. It does not want Pakistan's territory to be used as a launchpad for Western pressure. This reflects a broader fear within Tehran, that regional neighbors could become extensions of US strategy. On the other side, the United States is approaching this situation with caution and calculation. Washington's goal is not just peace, but controlled stability. A ceasefire that allows Iran to recover militarily would be seen as a strategic failure. That's why US envoys are emphasizing strict compliance, signaling that any economic cooperation with Iran could trigger sanctions. This creates a classic geopolitical dilemma for Pakistan. Economically, Pakistan needs energy and investment, something Iran can partially provide. But financially and politically, it remains tied to Western institutions and global markets influenced by the United States. In simple terms, Pakistan is being asked to choose between opportunity and security. And instead of choosing, it is attempting to balance both, a strategy that requires precise diplomacy and at times calculated ambiguity. Now, if we shift our focus to Washington, a different but equally complex story is unfolding. Charles III and Camilla are preparing for a state visit that could redefine the modern special relationship between the UK and the United States. This visit comes at a time when political trust between the two governments is unusually low. Donald Trump has openly criticized Britain's military capabilities and has clashed with Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Yet, paradoxically, he continues to express admiration for the British monarchy. This creates a unique diplomatic opening, one that bypasses traditional political channels. The British government is effectively relying on the king's personal influence, or soft power, to achieve what formal negotiations have struggled to accomplish. Soft power, in this context, is not about authority. It's about perception, respect, and symbolic influence. Historically, monarchs have used this form of diplomacy to maintain relationships even when governments disagree. For example, during periods of political tension in the 20th century, royal visits often helped reset diplomatic tone without requiring immediate policy changes. However, this strategy carries significant risk. The shadow of Jeffrey Epstein still looms over the monarchy, particularly due to allegations involving Prince Andrew. Figures like Virginia Giuffre continue to demand accountability, and public sentiment, especially in the United States, remains sensitive to this issue. From a communications perspective, this is a reputational minefield. Even a minor misstep in how the issue is acknowledged or avoided could dominate headlines and overshadow the diplomatic goals of the visit. There's also the human factor. At 77 and managing a long-term cancer condition, King Charles is undertaking a demanding schedule. This includes a historic address to the US Congress, a symbolic visit to national memorials, and multiple high-level meetings. The speech to Congress is particularly significant. When Elizabeth II addressed the same institution in 1991, it was during a period of strong transatlantic unity. Today, the context is very different. The king must balance multiple objectives: strengthening NATO ties, reinforcing support for Ukraine, and appealing to an American leadership that prioritizes national interest over alliances. This raises an important question. Can symbolic diplomacy still influence hard political realities? Looking ahead, several possible outcomes emerge. If Pakistan successfully manages its balancing act, it could establish itself as a key diplomatic hub in future global conflicts, similar to how Qatar or Turkey have positioned themselves in recent years. This would increase its strategic value and potentially attract international investment. However, failure could lead to increased pressure from both sides, forcing Pakistan into a more defined alignment, something it has historically tried to avoid. For the UK, success in Washington could revitalize the special relationship, proving that cultural and historical ties still matter in modern geopolitics. It could also strengthen the monarchy's role as a diplomatic asset. But if the visit fails, whether due to political disagreements or public controversy, it may accelerate a shift toward more transactional, less relationship-driven international politics. In the bigger picture, what we are witnessing is a transformation in how global power operates. Traditional alliances are being tested, new mediators are emerging, and influence is no longer confined to governments alone. Islamabad and Washington may seem like separate stories, but together they represent a single reality, a world in transition where the outcome of quiet meetings and symbolic gestures could shape the next era of international relations. And as these events continue to unfold, one thing remains certain: the decisions being made today will define the balance of power for years to come.